Boy, what's going on, everybody? It's your Uncle Wheezy. It's early in the afternoon here on a Wednesday, and I just added a new tier to the Patreon, which you can find on the scrolling bar below my name here, patreon.com/Uncle Wheezy. We've added a new $10 tier to the Patreon that is going to be a matchup template, just like the same that we've had before, but with some new additions into it. And I think it's going to be some really interesting stuff. It's going to give us a new layer of analytics to add to our capping. And it's been something that I've been working on for quite a while. We finally got a week off last week. And in that time, I was able to create this template. So I kind of want to take you through what I've been doing here. And it kind of started at the end of last year. When we get that month off between mid-December and mid-January, I did a lot of work behind the scenes reorganizing my database. And what I had done the first time was just kind of go card by card. I started one card back at like 2019, and I would just enter all the UFC stats and UFC history of every fighter on that card. And then I would just go on to the next card and the next card. And after a few months, you get a good chunk of fighters. You have most of the fighters in the database. But what I did not have was every fight. And what I did going back to December of 2022 was I decided that from January 1st, 2013 on, I was just going to get all of the fights. And so what I've done is I've kind of went through division by division here. Like this, for instance, is what I'm sharing here is the 135-pound women's division. And as you can see here, you know, the very first fight that ever took place in this division was Ronda Rousey versus Liz Carmouche, and it happened February 23rd, 2013. So we've got the entire history of the division. And I've got fighter A's stats, which in this case will be Ronda Rousey because she won the fight. Knockdown, significant strikes landed, significant strikes attempted. And you know, you can see it. It's all, this is basically everything that's available on UFCstats.com. And I went fight by fight, and I got every fight that has happened from January 1st, 2013 until the present day. So if I were to open up my 2022 UFC fights database here, you can see that this here, you guys, you know, this is the most recent fights, and the entirety of the work, 4,987 fights. I literally got this information by going one fight at a time, one card at a time, 1 month at a time, 1 year at a time, from 2013, 2014, 2015, 300 to 500 fights every year, cutting and pasting directly from UFC stats into a converter I had built in Excel, and then wound up getting it into this spreadsheet, which now has every fight from 2013 until the present. So once I had taken care of that project, everybody, which was a very long project, I'm just going to scroll up through it here while I talk to show you the entirety of the work that your Uncle Wheezy did putting all this shit together, okay? Because this is almost 5,000 fights, and we have all the data now. So what I started doing was sorting these weight class by weight class and gleaning some analytics from it, right? So this is what we used to start the prop template. Now that we had every fight taking place between 2013 and now, we could get divisional benchmarks for each division and determine how many fights go over 1.5 rounds, say in the middleweight weight class, how many go under 1.5, what the percentage of each is. But what I really wanted to do was get divisional benchmarks, division by division, that would allow us to know what the average amount of significant strikes landed for a heavyweight is, what the average amount of significant strikes landed for a women's strawweight is. But as you can see, we've almost scrolled through half of the fights here, and we're still going. But we've got all of it. So now that we have these benchmarks, it became a programming exercise for me. And what I wanted to do was build these benchmarks into this template here. So for instance, this is the women's 115-pound division. I've created a spreadsheet that does the counting of all the information that I've cut and pasted from that database into here. And like, for instance, we could see now the very first women's strawweight fight was Claudia Gadelha versus Tina Latamaki back in 2014. And we've got all the stats going forward from there. And we know now that there are 239 fights that have happened since 2013 that have been 3-round fights. And we've got 25 fights that have been 5-round fights. And we've used this to get all of the analytics, right? And then we use this to bring up the prop template, and all these analytics. So like fight goes to decision here for this Caceres Pineda fight is a featherweight fight. We know that 56.29% of these fights go to decision. And we can see that right here in this database. For instance, if I were to go to men's 145, we're going to see the same thing up here. 43.71% of fights don't go to decision, 56.29% do. 533 fights, 49 5-round fights. So these statistics are being shifted from one spreadsheet into another. And now that we have all these analytics, I'm building them into the spreadsheet. So this is an example of what we're going to be doing going forward here on this new template. So we start with the measurable and the career experience stats. And we have the birthday of both fighters, the age of both fighters in years, months, and days. We've got the height, 5'7", 72-inch reach for both fighters here. Whether they are an orthodox, a southpaw, or a switch stance fighter, where they train, and the country that they are out of. And then we get to the pro experience stats. The pound F means number of fights, pro record, obviously self-explanatory. So 22 fights for Arman Tsarukyan, 19 wins and 3 losses. He has 204.73 minutes in the UFC cage, or in the pro cage, and his average fight time as a professional is 9.31 minutes. And the length of his pro career, the date from his pro debut to the current day, 7 years, 8 months, and 2 days. And then we've got the UFC experience here. Number of fights, 8 in the UFC, a 6-2 record, 109 minutes in the UFC cage, 13.64 minute average fight time at the UFC. And then the new one here that we have is the layoff. This is going to be the distance between the last fight and the current day. And for Arman Tsarukyan, it's 5 months and 10 days. For Joaquim Silva, his opponent, 7 months and 26 days. And in the finished stats here, I've tweaked it a little bit more. I've added more columns so that we not only know what percentage of the wins for Arman Tsarukyan are by submission, what percentage are by knockout, but how many there were. So we know that of those 6 wins that Arman has, 2 of them are by knockout, and that's 33% of his wins. And then we have the overall finishing rates, 26% by submission, 37% by knockout. And then we also know what he's done in decisions in the UFC and overall. But now what we're going to look at here are these significant striking numbers. And this is going to be interesting to see what I've done here, right? Because the TSSL, TSSA means total significant strikes landed, total significant strikes attempted. These are the offensive numbers. So we know that Tsarukyan has landed 388. He's attempted 860. And he's got a 45.12% accuracy. Now, 45.12, we could see that that's like a slightly green number there. So this is probably just a slightly above average striking accuracy. Now we see for Joaquim Silva, we see a 39.41% striking accuracy. And we see that that's shaded red, which is going to indicate that it's going to be a below average accuracy. And then we see here for SSL-M, SSL, SSA/M, and versus benchmark. So this is significant strikes landed per minute. This is significant strikes attempted per minute. And versus the benchmark is Arman Tsarukyan is landing 3.56 significant strikes per minute. But we know that the benchmark, he's negative 0.03. So the benchmark is actually 3.59 significant strikes per minute. And for instance, if we were to go back to this Prize Picks analytics template here for men's 155 pounds, we're going to see the same thing when we zoom in that the significant strikes landed average is 3.58. We see it right there, 3.58. So it's actually 3.59 in the spreadsheet is where, because it's actually just changed just a little bit. But we see that this is being compared to the average, and then it's going to be color coded depending on whether it's above or below average. And then the knockdown percentage and the knockdowns per 15 minutes. So he's landing a knockdown on 0.52% of his significant strikes, and he's getting 0.27 knockdowns per 15 minutes, which is just a little bit below the average for the weight class. And we see here on the other side, Joaquim Silva landing a little bit more, attempting a little bit more. So we can see that when we look at these stats, for instance, we see green here for Joaquim, we see orange here for Tsarukyan. So we know that Joaquim Silva is just a little bit more active landing and throwing significant strikes in comparison to Arman Tsarukyan and in comparison to the division as a whole. So it's cool because you can not only compare fighter A's stats to fighter B's stats, but now you can compare both of their stats to the divisional averages, and not just the averages overall, because who cares, what the average between all the fights is. We've got 12 different weight classes in the UFC, from women's 115 pounds to women's 145 pounds is 4 weight classes. And then from men's 125 to men's heavyweight is 8 weight classes. So it's more important to have these analytics weight class by weight class to determine how these fighters are performing against the peers that matter. And those are the fighters that they're sharing a weight class with, the ones that they'll potentially be fighting in the future. And so we've got the defensive significant striking stats, same thing. Total significant strikes absorbed, 211. Total significant strike attempts seen, 468. He's got about a 55% striking defense, which is just a little bit below average. And we see that Joaquim here right around average at 55.67% defense. And we can see that Tsarukyan absorbs 1.93 significant strikes per minute, and that's 1.65 less than what the divisional average is. So his defense is very good. So when you're absorbing less significant strikes and your opponents are attempting less significant strikes, that's going to be green on the defensive end, because that's a good thing. You want your opponent, you want your fighter absorbing less strikes, seeing less significant strike attempts. And then we're going to see here that he's never absorbed a knockdown. So his knockdown versus benchmark is negative 0.29, which is also very good here. And we just do this for everything now. Offensive distance striking statistics. So we got total distance strikes landed, total distance strikes attempted, and the distance striking accuracy compared to the benchmark. We got how many distance strikes landed per minute, 4.76. How many distance strikes attempted per minute, 12.24. And we see that those numbers are both slightly above average for what the divisional average is here. And we see that he's landing 1.91 more distance strikes per minute than he absorbs. And that's 4.76 minus 2.85. That's 1.91. So we see that his differential and his ratio are both excellent. He's landing a lot more than he absorbs. It's well above the divisional average. So Tsarukyan's got excellent defense, is what this is showing us here, with these big green numbers here in the defense and the green numbers here in the differential, making a big difference in his defense, right? And then we see the distance knockdowns that he's absorbed. He's absorbing a knockdown on 0.74% of the distance strikes that he absorbs, and he's absorbing 0.27 distance knockdowns per 15 minutes spent at distance. And then these are the defensive distance striking stats. We got how many distance strikes he's absorbed, how many distance strikes he's seen, what the distance defense is and how that's compared to the benchmark, how many he absorbs per minute at distance, how many he sees per minute at distance. The DKA, how distance knockdowns absorbed percent. He's never been knocked down, so he's been knocked down on 0% of the distance strikes that he's absorbed. This is how many per 15 minutes. This is how many minutes for distance minutes here. This is how many minutes out of Tsarukyan's 109 minutes of cage time that he's spent at distance striking range. And here's the percentage of his fights that are spent at distance striking range. And we've got it for both fighters. And then obviously we've got the clinch and ground striking stats here. So he's landed 116 clinch and ground strikes together. He's attempted 160. He's got a 72.5% accuracy, which is a little bit above average for the division. And he's landing 2.23 clinch and ground strikes per minute, and he's attempting 3.08. This is his control time or clinch ground striking defense, and then how many he absorbs per minute and how many his opponents have thrown. And then if we go over here to the grappling stats, Arman Tsarukyan, TTDA is total takedowns and total takedowns attempted. 24 takedowns, 72 attempted, 33% accuracy is orange, so it's slightly below the divisional average. And then we see that he lands 3.3 and he attempts 9.9 takedowns per 15 minutes, both well above average. But he has never attempted a submission and he's never gotten a reverse. So those are both a little bit below average. And then these are the defensive grappling stats. His opponents have taken him down 10 times on 40 attempts. He's got a 75% takedown defense, which is above average for the division because it's green. He's absorbing 1.37 or allowing 1.37 takedowns per 15 minutes, and his opponents are attempting 5.5 takedowns per 15 minutes. And he's being taken down a little bit less than what the average fighter is, and his opponents are seeing a little bit, or he's seeing a little bit more takedown attempts from his opponents than what the divisional average is. And he's also never been reversed, and he's never had a submission attempted against him. The CT and the CTA percent is control time percent and control time allowed. So Arman Tsarukyan controls his opponents 35.37% of his control time, and he gets of his cage time, and he allows 12.22%. So when you add those two numbers up, you get 47.59%. And when you add that to 52.41%, you get 100%. So 52% of his cage time is spent at distance. 35% of his cage time is spent controlling his opponents in either in the clinch or on the ground. And 12.22% of his UFC cage time is spent being controlled on the cage or on the ground. 2.89 is the ratio of control time to control time allowed. So if you take 35.37% and divide it by 12.22%, you get 2.89. And that signifies that he's winning 74% of the control time positions. We get that number by taking the amount of control time that they've gotten and dividing it by control time gotten, control time allowed. So it's just the percentage of the total control time that he's winning. So in this case, that's 74%. Then we have strength of schedule stats here. Arman Tsarukyan, now the first two lines here are overall because we have the O. These are the strength of schedule here in his wins in the UFC, and these are the strength of schedule here in the losses. So for overall, Arman Tsarukyan's, we have to see how many fights he had. He's had 8 UFC fights. If you add up the 8 UFC records of those opponents, you get 49 wins and 23 losses. The average UFC record of an opponent that Arman Tsarukyan has faced, 6.13 wins, 2.88 losses. And if you add up 6.13 and 2.88, you get 9. That's so his average opponent has 9 UFC fights. So he's fighting experienced guys. And the ratio of wins to losses, which 49 divided by 23 actually equals 2.13. So it shows that not only is he fighting experienced opponents, but he's fighting experienced opponents that get more than 2 wins for every loss. So he's fighting a very good brand of competition overall. And then if you add up the guys, now I believe Arman is 6-2 in the UFC. The 6 guys that he's beaten, if you add up their win and loss records, they're 31 wins and 20 losses. The average record of the guy that Tsarukyan has beaten, 5.17 wins, 3.33 losses, 8.5 total fights, 1.55 win to loss ratio. So he's fighting a good level of competition there. And the guys that he's lost to, combined record of 18 wins and 3 losses. That's a 10.5 total fights and a 6-1 win to loss ratio. So obviously Arman is only losing to the best level of competition. And then we got the last 5 fights for each fighter here. Win by unanimous decision over Damir Ismagulov. A loss by unanimous decision to Mateus Gamrot. He knocked out Joel Alvarez. He knocked out Christos Giagos, and a win by unanimous decision over Matt Frevola. So those are all the stats that are going to be available on the new Patreon, $10 a month. I've done a lot of work, like I say, to get these divisional benchmarks in each division, to do the programming in the sheet. I just want to show you guys something here if I still have it up. I do not, but I can pull it up for you guys. No, I got to pull it up over here. So in here, for instance, Zach Pauga has a 67.41% accuracy. And Zach is a light heavyweight. So this is the 205-pound division. And why is this sheet locked? Okay. The conditional formatting here, right? What I've done is for each one of these cells, I've went in and conditionally formatted this cell. And you can see here, we can't really see the numbers in here, but I've put a midpoint here is 0.4831, and 48.31% is the divisional average for 205-pound fighters for significant striking accuracy. And so that will be shaded yellow, as you can see the yellow below it. And then I've put 0.4331 here, and I've shaded that red, and I've put 5.331 here, and I've shaded that green. So that means if you're 5% above average, you're gonna be shaded in green because you're 5% above average for the division. And so every one of these cells has this coding embedded in it. And I've done that for 33 cells, or I'm sorry, 66 total cells on 12 different spreadsheets. So you can just imagine the amount of work that went into this. So this is what I wanted to show you guys. This is the new advanced stats package. And this is what's going to be available on the Patreon. $10 a month going forward. The old stats package, which is going to be available for $5, is going to be basic like it used to be. It will not have the distance strikes in there. So if you want distance striking stats from here on forward, join the $10 tier and you will get this color-coded tier here on all this information built into all of the spreadsheets. And then if you're already on the advanced tier of my Patreon, where you're subscribing to the prop template, this is going to be included with that, so you don't have to upgrade anything there. So just wanted to run this by all you guys. See a couple of you here in the chat saying, Lou Betya saying, what is this sorcery? It's a lot of sorcery. It was a lot of work during the week off, but I'm going to be adding new things over and over again, you guys. We're going to be building like this sheet here, which has the prize picks analytics, is just going to be going division by division. And we're going to be building these analytics into another template that's going to help us make decisions on whether we want the over-under on takedowns, whether we want the over-under on fantasy points, whether we want the over-under on significant strikes, and we can determine how many strikes are landed per minute at distance, 4.52 in this division, which is lightweight. How many are landed in clinch and ground, 2.15 per minute. 60% of lightweight fights spend at distance striking range. So 39.62 are spent at clinch and ground striking in control time positions, which we can see here. 19.81 times 2 is 39.62. So that number plus this number times 2 equals 100%. So we're going to build all of these analytics so that you have benchmarks when you're making a decision on whether you want, for this week, let's say Kai Kara France's over or under on significant strikes. You're going to be able to know how many Kai Kara France's landing per minute, how many distance strikes he's landing per minute spent at distance, how many clinch and ground strikes he's landing per minute spent in control time positions, what the divisional averages are, how many times he's gotten more, less than that. And then we're also going to do an expected value as well. So we've got a lot of new things coming up here on this Patreon. I'm really excited to release it to all you guys. My guy Chris, I haven't seen you forever. Chris, I hope all is well, my man. He's saying, "Oi, Unc, you're streaming early. Respect." Yeah, I just wanted to break down what's available on the new Patreon here, and we'll be doing a little bit more work later on today as well on Pub Sports Radio and right here on Uncle Weezy's channel. Subhuman Gaucho in the room saying, "Oi, good afternoon, Weezy. Good to see you hanging out in here. Smash that like for this man," says Chris. Please do. We got Subhuman saying, "Afternoon, Lou." Lou saying, "Sup, buddy?" The DXJC 56 saying, "Weezy stays grinding in the background." I'm always doing that, you guys. I'm trying to be the market for UFC statistics and analytics. And in order to do that, I have to take time away from capping sometimes in order to build these products in the background, because it is a lot of programming. It's a lot of stuff that goes into this, but I hope that you guys will find it useful. And I hope that I'll see some guys and ladies signing up for this new $10 tier on the Patreon. And we got Subhuman saying, "Just saw you cash that freebie, Lou. Good stuff, brother. Nice work, Lou." And Silky B saying, "Still the man after all these years. You got it right." So appreciate you guys hanging out. I think that this is going to be a good little tool for everybody that does already use the advanced stats package, whether it's the old one or the new one, knowing what all of the abbreviations mean and how to make the most out of this particular spreadsheet. So looking forward to seeing you guys sign up for this. Hopefully I'll see you guys later on today on Pub Sports Radio for the DFS show at 6 o'clock Central Time. And let me know if you guys want any additional content this week from my channel. We will talk to you guys later. Let's stack cash tickets like flapjacks for UFC Vegas 74 and for all the events going forward from here. And definitely really want to say thank you to all the people that are already on the Patreon. It's the Patreon community that allows me to be able to do this full time. So everybody that's supporting my work, I got much love for you guys. It means so much to me that you're willing to put your money down and support the hard work that I'm doing behind the scenes here. So Subhuman Gaucho saying, "This is an enormous help. Thank you, Weezy. We'll be jumping on the Patreon. I appreciate you, Subhuman. I hope all you guys do that as well. And I will see you guys soon. I'm going to jump off now, but get a look at this. Hopefully this will, interest a lot of you and you'll be willing to sign up and support my work. Good night, everyone. Take care.